What up, Wizards? It's Dev and Ziggy. We're from Mtg. We like it at Magic. And today we got a little 2-for-1 spoiler action for you because we knew there was going to be some Modern Horizons 2 spoilers, and there's plenty to talk about there. But I don't think any of us were really expecting Forgotten Realms spoilers, and they were just like, hey, you guys want to see some cards? I got some cards over here, man. 3 of them. They're really cool, too. You want to check them out? And we're like, yes, I want to do that. So today we're going to look at these 3 Forgotten Realms spoilers, and we'll briefly talk about some of the stuff we've seen in the Modern Horizons 2 spoilers so far, because there's a lot of hype there, too. The last thing I'll say before... Ziggy's so sweet. As I was saying, last thing I'll say before I really dive into it here is that there have already been some Forgotten Realms spoilers. Did you know that? It's totally fine if you didn't. You can get caught up with this video right here. Link in the description. It's a good YouTube video. But aside from that, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff. Follow me on Twitter here by putting those words into your device, or you can watch me play Magic here by putting those words into also any old device. Your toaster, so watch me play Magic there. But aside from that, let's probably go ahead and get to it. There's a lot of cards today, and we've got a lot to talk about. Now, the first soon-to-be standard legal card we got to see the other day was Drizzy Jordan. I probably butchered that. I'm sorry. I'm a little self-conscious about this name in particular because I've played maybe 7 total hours of D&D in my entire life. I know. Take my nerd card away or whatever. But I have never heard of this character, so Drizzy Jordan is the best I can do, and I apologize. But it's 5 mana, 3 in the Selesnya colors, for a 3/3 legendary elf ranger with double strike. That's not terrible. And when it ETBs, you create Guinevere. I think I got that right. A legendary 4/1 green cat creature token with trample. Whenever a creature dies, if it had power greater than Zzz power, put a number of +1/+1 counter on Zzz equal to the difference. I kind of like this guy. I don't think he's amazing because 5 mana is a lot. Let's face it, it's a lot of mana. It's so much mana for a thing that dies to Frostbite. I guess even if it dies to Frostbite, it still leaves behind a token. That doesn't line up very well against Fervent Champion and another first strike stuff. They got them all, the Skyclaves or whatever. But still, a 4 power token being left behind, even if this dies to removal, is still fine. And I originally thought this is going to be like terrible with the Seeker's Chariot, and that might be like the difference between it being bad and it being good. But people on Twitter really kind of talked me off of the ledge on that, right? Because if you go turn 4 Esika's Chariot, and then turn 5 this Deuterino, and then you use the 4/1 token to crew the chariot and attack with it, well, yeah, you have to sacrifice one of the tokens because you just created a copy of a legendary token, but you do get to untap, effectively, that token that crewed the chariot in the first place. So that's kind of nice. You end that sequence with a crewed chariot, an untapped 4/1, and you get a +1/+1 counter on Drizzt, because one of the tokens died, and it had higher power than him. So altogether, that sequence actually isn't too bad. This guy's also perfectly blinkable, so long as the token dies, and you can blink him for a fresh token. Or maybe you use blink effects as an untapper of sorts, kind of like we did with Esika's Chariot in our last example there. You swing with the token, and then second main phase, you blink this guy, comes back in, gives you a token, and you sacrifice the tapped one to the legend rule. So that could work, leave you with an untapped token. A pseudo-vigilant token. So that's all well and good. Blink effects aren't terrible with the dude either, but again, I'd say at 5 mana, it's 5 mana. In a color combination that's not seeing a whole lot of play at the moment, and I don't think that like a 5 mana guy is going to really help it see a whole lot of play. I think this is probably mostly worse than Tolsimir, and Tolsimir only saw like a very sparing play. I think we try to kid ourselves. Like, Tolsimir was so good, it saw play. Not really. It only saw like a little bit of play here and there. And I think this is probably worse than Tolsimir in a lot of ways. But don't discount the double strike. And this probably puts your opponent in weird positions where they don't want to block the token, because if they block the token and it dies, or if you block with the token and the token dies, then suddenly on the crackback you have a 4/4 guy with double strike, and that seems good, right? So if you give the guy trample, obviously double strike works great with trample, and it's there's a few things worth noting about this. For 5 mana, you get 7 power on 2 bodies, and both bodies have a relevant keyword ability. Trample's always better than you think it is, and double strike is just as good as you think it is, because you think it's good. There's also the way this is worded, right? It says whenever a creature dies. It's not whenever a creature you control dies. So if you kill your opponent's Lovestruck Beast with this guy on the table, well, suddenly you got a 4/4 guy. That's actually, you got a 5/5 guy because you put counters on it equal to the difference. So pretty silly with creatures like Lovestruck Beast and Yorion running around. If you kill those, this guy gets counters. So doesn't even have to be creatures you control, which is the kind of restriction that you would expect to see. Altogether, I think this is the kind of package that would have been like really good a couple of years ago and might still be good now, but for some reason in this world of Throne of Eldraine or whatever, I'm still underwhelmed by a card that I would have freaked out about just like 2 or 3 years ago, right? Again, 7 power, 2 bodies, relevant keyword abilities, double strike is serious. I mean, you're kind of getting 10 power on 2 bodies when you factor in the double strike. It's a real headache for your opponent to make decisions in combat with this guy around. There's some really good things about it, but at the end of the day, I'm not too sure. Oh, it is extinction event proof, right? So the name Even, they clean up the token, but this guy stays behind. The name Odd, they clean up this guy, token stays behind. So that's, something to think about. But either way, I could be more impressed by this package, but altogether I give it like a solid 7. It's not a bad looking Magic card. But up next, let's check out Bruenor Battlehammer, unless it's just Bruenor Battlehammer. I'm not sure. It's 4 mana, 2, a red and a white for a 5/3 legendary dwarf warrior. Everything in this set dies to Frostbite. Each creature you control gets +2/+0 for each equipment attached to it. Neato burrito. You also may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate each turn. So the first thing I thought about was Colossus Hammer in Historic. That seems like a thing you could do. But you know what else we got that I didn't think of until, I don't know, like 20 minutes before I cut this camera on, was Vorpal Blade. In the last round of previews, we saw Vorpal Blade, and the equip cost is extremely high because it says that they lose. So gotta probably have a high equip cost. It makes sense. But since we have this, Vorpal Blade costs 0 to equip in your Mardu deck, as long as you have this guy out. And that's actually kind of sweet. It's also just really good with Embercleave, right? It gives the creature another +2/+0 to go along with the +1/+1 and trample and double strike. And you can just equip Embercleave to anything for 0 during your turn. So I don't know. It all seems okay to me, but overall, I'm not sure the package is quite good enough. Like if we're looking for like an equipment payoff for the Boros Warrior equipment deck, we really couldn't be looking for a better one than this, right? But we already have Halvar at 4 mana, and I think that's probably better for a lot of the equipment decks anyway. But maybe you run a couple of copies of this guy because equipping really heinous stuff for free is good. And then obviously the boost is fantastic too, especially if you do have a Halvar out, or if you do have a core Blade Master or something like that, giving your dudes double strike. A +2/+0 is a fine boost. Again, maybe the card's better than I think it is, but altogether, this one's around the same level as Drizzt to me, although this one's a little bit more specialized. Whereas Drizzt looks a little bit better in a vacuum. This goes in a specific deck, and Drizzt doesn't necessarily do that, so this looks slightly better. Boros Warriors equipment, if they've been trying to make that deck a thing for a while, but you know, it's Wizards Fetch. They're never going to make Fetch a thing. And in this case, Fetch is Boros Warriors with equipment sub-themes. And maybe it'll get good enough one day. It's got to be good enough before rotation, because I think when Embercleave leaves the format, it's pretty much a done deal. But if they're ever going to make Warriors, the Equipment Warriors deck relevant, it's probably going to be with stuff like this, but I'm still not sure this card is really good enough to, make the grade in that deck. But moving on to the last card that we saw from Forgotten Realms, the last standard legal thing, and it's Lolth, Spider Queen, 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a 4 loyalty planeswalker, Lolth. This is one of the few D&D characters I actually have heard of, and I'm kind of stoked that they made the Spider Queen a planeswalker. But the passive on this is whenever a creature you control dies, put a loyalty counter on Spider Queen. You can 0 Lolth to draw a card and lose a life. You can -3 this thing to create 2 2/1 black spider creature tokens that have menace and reach, an important ability. You can also -8 Lolth to get an emblem with whenever an opponent is dealt combat damage by 1 or more creatures you control. If that player lost less than 8 life this turn, they lose life equal to the difference. It's a spider planeswalker. I just said the other day on stream that I think spiders might be, when pressed, spiders might actually be like my favorite tribe in Magic. Because I don't go in for like elves or goblins or humans that much, dwarves and stuff. I like dragons and stuff, but for the most part, I like weird creature types. I like spiders and nightmares and horrors and stuff like that. And so I like anytime we see like any form of spider travel support. So I'm here for Lolth for that reason, if nothing else. But I think this is a pretty solid planeswalker. Reminds me of the 6-mana Garruk a little bit, except that I believe Garruk was just like when wolves die, when the wolf tokens die, Garruk gets loyalty back. But this is just when any creature you control dies. it gets loyalty back. And it's insane. It's so good. It's such an interesting little thing that it does, because that means you can sacrifice a bunch of creatures to Woe Strider or, whatever, Village Rites if you got the extra mana laying around. And at that point, this just starts getting loyalty without you even having to attack or block with anything. It's a real headache when your opponent goes to attack into it, because if you do have ways to protect it, which should be pretty easy, it just creates 2 spiders that can block flyers. That's really interesting. This thing protects itself very, very well. When the spiders die, it just gets more loyalty. So just a really sick looking planeswalker that also just gives you, free card draw. Seems pretty decent. As far as mono black planeswalkers go, I think this is a really good rate for 5 mana, right? Being able to create 2 creatures with the -3 is both defensive and offensive, depending on the situation. Getting to draw more cards is great. And just any deck that plays creatures is going to like something like this, especially decks that play creatures like, Skyclave Shade and stuff that keeps coming back over and over. Seems okay, right? Decks that want their creatures to die. Decks that use Plumb the Forbidden, right? Imagine that you hit Plumb for 4 or 5, and then suddenly you get a bunch of loyalty on this thing. The ultimate's fairly easy to get to compared to some other planeswalkers, but I'm a little disappointed that by the phrase "or more" on the ultimate. I want this to happen every single time that a small creature does combat damage, but I think you can only do up to 8 combat damage, or up to 8 damage with it. But that's not bad either, right? It turns your Foulmire Knights and other 1/1s and stuff into 8 power creatures effectively. By the way, do you get it? They become spiders. They get a bunch of legs. Good flavor. Altogether, not only do I like the flavor of the card and what they've done with one of the only characters I have any connection to in Dungeons & Dragons, I respect what they've done with that, but I also think that just at the end of the day, solid-looking Magic card that I'll give a 7.75. It's not bad at all, and I think that in the right environment, this could see some amount of standard play. Maybe not immediately, but maybe someday. But now, let's get into some of these Modern Horizon spoilers. And don't click away just yet. I know I'm not really the modern guy around here. And you might not even be that stoked for this set, but I think it's just fun to look at new cards and stuff. And some of these I haven't even really read yet. And I did that specifically for this video because I kind of thought that would be more fun. Right, so let's see what takes we can generate with a bunch of cards that I don't even really yet know what they entirely do. Let's check out the next card. An annoying-looking Izzet commander from what I can tell of the text box so far. This is Yusri Fortune's Flame. 3 mana, 1 in Izzet colors for a 2/3 legendary Ifrit with flying. And when it attacks, you choose a number between 1 and 5. Flip that many coins. For each flip you win, draw a card. For each flip you lose, Yusri deals 2 damage to you. If you won 5 flips this way, wow, you may cast spells from your hand this turn without paying their mana cost. You would have to have some 2016 Iowa caucus coin flip luck to get all 5 of these. No one's going to get that reference, but to get all 5 flips, you're going to have some serious luck on your side, bud. But when it does happen, the whole table's going to be happy for you until you do stuff. Until you actually use the ability to just cast free spells like you have in Omnipotence. I would probably rather just cast Omnipotence. I think 9 mana for an enchantment is probably fewer hoops to jump through than this, honestly. But, people love flipping coins. There are some people out there, a very small percentage of the player base, but it's probably 5% or so, that just absolutely love coin flipping cards. So here's a commander for you. But let's look at Flametongue Yearling, a callback to Flametongue Kavu, which is a card that I hold very near and dear, so hope they didn't screw this up. It looks cool, so from what I can tell, it's a 2 mana that's 2 red. For a 2/1 Kavu with multi-kicker 2, you may kick it as many times as you want, in case you haven't seen this ability. Flametongue Yearling enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each time it was kicked. When it ETBs, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature. Okay, so it's just a really flexible Flametongue Kavu. But if you want normal Flametongue Kavu mode, you have to pay more mana for it than a Flametongue Kavu. But if you pay 4 mana for it, like a normal Flametongue Kavu, it still bolts something when it ETBs. And that's not bad, because you get a 3/2 to go along with it. But it's probably still not super modern playable. This is just really limited playable. That's what this is. This is a limited playable card. I get it. Okay. I don't know why it took me so long to realize that. It's an uncommon and everything, but not sure how much modern play a card like this ends up seeing, but a scalable Flametongue Kavu was a cool idea. But up next, let's look at the Dinosaur.
Let's look at the dinosaur, everybody. It's Thrasta, Tempest Roar. TTR is 12 mana. But I guess it's Galta rules. It's not really 12 mana. 10 and 2 green for a 7/7 legendary dino. And its cost, there it is, costs 3 less to cast for each other spell cast this turn. It has trample and haste, and it tramples... That's a funny ability. Trample over planeswalkers. This creature can deal excess combat damage to the controller of the planeswalker it's attacking. Thrasta Tempest Roar has hexproof, as long as it entered the battlefield this turn. Oh, okay. So it gets hexproof, so it can attack at least once. All right. This looks like a super questing beast. In a way, Questing Beast has a version of Trample over Planeswalkers. Just, I do all the damage to you and the Planeswalker, which is, I guess, strictly more powerful than this. But still, a 7/7 Trample Haste, Trample over Planeswalkers, which should just be a thing. Trample should go over Planeswalkers anyway. And sort of hexproof for a turn. That's a lot, but how much does it actually cost, right? So 12 mana normally. So if you cast 2 spells before it, you get a 6 mana discount. It still costs 6 mana. That's okay. So if you cast 3 spells, that's 3, 6, 9. Then it costs 3. So it would still kind of cost. Let's say you cast 3 1-mana spells into this. So that costs you 3 mana too. It still costs 6 mana. That's kind of a lot. It's a bit much, but I guess it can be reanimated. And if you reanimate it, it has hexproof, and that's kind of cool. If you blink it, it gets hexproof again. So that's kind of neat. There's some cool things about this. I'm not sure that it's modern playable at the end of the day. I think it's just like the Timmy card. It's a big legendary dinosaur with all the power and toughness. I can't not like this card. It's just in my nature to love this. But is it going to see a whole lot of play? I don't think so. But next we'll move on to Unmarked Grave. I am familiar with this. It's been making the rounds on Twitter. This is 2 mana, 1 and a black. For a sorcery, search your library for a non-legendary card, put the card into your graveyard, then shuffle. So what they did is they fixed Entomb. But it's still pretty powerful, even at double the rate, right? A whole 2 mana, but that's 100% more mana. But even at double the rate and the inability to get Gristlebrands and other legendary stuff, I think this is probably still okay. Fixed Entomb is still a really powerful card because Entomb is a disgustingly powerful card. Let's check out Profane Tutor. This one's been making the rounds on Twitter too, and I really like this card. This is 0 mana, effectively, but you suspend 2 for 1 and a black. So for Demonic Tutor casting cost, you can suspend 2. Search your library for a card, put it in your hand, shuffle. Whoops. So it's just a delayed Demonic Tutor. If you don't know how suspend works, because you ain't never seen that in your life, you basically just put the card into exile and then remove a counter from it every turn until there's no counters on it left. So after a couple of turns, you got yourself a free Demonic Tutor. Demonic Tutor that leaves all of your mana open. Pretty good. It's actually not terrible, right? Because you'll get this on, turn 4 in this case? If you cast this on turn 2, which I'm not sure in Modern that you want to be using your whole turn 2 to cast this card. But let's just say that you do that. And then on turn 4, you go search for any 4-drop in the world. Just drop that. Or you search for a counterspell, removal piece, whatever you need, right? So the situation might change by then. Just whatever you might need on turn 4, go grab it, and you've already spent the mana for it. I think that's, or you've already spent the mana for this card at least. I think that's actually probably good enough, but it really all depends on whether skipping your turn 2 in such a format where turn 2 matters so much is really what you want to be doing. But I think the trade-off for a tutor on turn 4 is good enough. Now, when you top deck this, probably not super good, right? On turn 7, when you're about to die, top decking this does literally nothing. It doesn't do anything. It's bad. So I'm not really sure about where this falls on the axis, on the top deck versus in original hand axis. But I think that as a card that you draw in your opener, it probably has the ability to be very, very good. But speaking of a card that reminds you of good times, here's Rashad Dockhand right here, baby. This is just 1 blue mana for a 1/2 Merfolk with Island Walk. Island Walk. How often do you see Island Walk in cards anymore? But the cool thing about this is that you can pay 1 and tap it to tap target land, son. So this is just Rashad import. That's why that word occurs on both cards. You see, it's a callback. Although this is a Rashad import that dies to removal. It's not part of your mana base, so there's actual opportunity cost associated with it. I'm not sure that that's great. I'm really not. And it dies to bolt. Although it has this kind of must-kill thing going on. If you get 1 turn to start using this, it becomes fantastic. Just for anyone who is not initiated, who is not familiar with how powerful Rashad Import actually was, it doesn't look super powerful, especially to a lot of newer Magic players or just people who have never experienced it, even if you've been playing for 5 or 10 years. If you've never played against Rashad Import, it can be hard to understand how impactful the card is over the game. I know that it costs you mana to use this ability on both cards, but it's still well worth it to choke your opponent out of important mana that they might need, right? They're playing a 2 or 3 color deck, we'll tap down their blue source. Rashad Import's a colorless land that goes in literally every deck that's 1 or 2 colors. Whereas this only goes in blue decks that want to play creatures, and that is way different. But as a merfolk, I love that they gave it that creature type. As a merfolk, I think this definitely slots into like every merfolk deck, especially the ones that have this more tempo-oriented game plan. A lot of them do. This slots directly in as maybe one of the better merfolk one-drops we've literally ever seen. It's that good in that way. But let's take a look at Dakin, Shadowslayer. Again, you want to talk about good times? This was 6th grade for me, but Dakin Shadowslayer is 3 mana, Esper colors, right, for a zero loyalty planeswalker. But hold on here, because the way they call back to what the old Dakin did when he was still a creature before he got his spark is that when it enters the battlefield, it gets a number of loyalty counters equal to the number of lands you control. Now the old Dakin had power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. So you see what they did there? All right, so you can +1 it to surveil too. Interesting. I guess Dakin surveils? Never knew to put those two things together, but sure. You can also -3 this to exile target creature, and you can -6 it to put an artifact card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. So really interesting ultimate there. And if you play this late enough in the game, you just ultimate it immediately, and maybe even keep it around, like on 7 lands. You ultimate this immediately, grab whatever artifact that you want to, put it on play, and you still have a Dakin. That's really not terrible at all, right? The +2 isn't bad. Surveil 2 is not really terrible. It's really not bad. And if you surveil an artifact into your yard, you can eventually ultimate it. Exile a creature is great, especially if you play this on 4 lands. I think that's fantastic. I'm not sure how much Modern play it sees, because the scalability I don't think is as good in Modern as it would be in a format like Standard. But there are decks in Modern, like Blue-White Control. It's actually a very important deck in Modern, to my understanding. And a card like this is very tempting for a deck like that to add black for, if you want to play Esper Control or something. I think a card like this is actually really tempting, because if you play it on 3, you can just play it on curve as exile target creature or surveil if you want to, especially against other control decks. Playing it early might be a good idea, but if you don't draw it until late, or you just want to draw the game out until this is a great card, just drop it when you're on anywhere between 5 and 8 lands, and suddenly it can exile a thing and have a bunch of loyalty left. It can surveil forever and ultimate twice and stuff. Like, the thing can actually be a massive threat if you can take control of the game. The problem is, I think there might be other ways to win games and sort of turn the corner that are better than this, right? So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm gonna fangirl over Dakin all day. I really like what they did with it flavor-wise. I love that he's a planeswalker. I love that this card reminds me of just one of the best periods of my life. In some ways, one of the worst periods in other ways. But, just this card does embody old school Magic fusing with new school Magic to me in a lot of ways, and I'm a huge fan of, if nothing else, just the flavor. But I actually do like the functionality here too. I think it's got a shot. But finally, let's take a look at the thing everyone's talking about. This is Grief right here. 2 and 2 black for a 3/2 elemental incarnation with Menace. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an on-land card from it. That player discards that card. Now you can evoke it to exile a black card from your hand. This has some ramifications, right? Because you can go turn 1 this into Ephemerate while this trigger is on the stack. And then blink it, and at that point, your opponent gets thought seized twice. You get 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. And since you ephemerated rather than evoked, right, it's a new instance of the creature since you blinked it. You also just get to keep the Grief out. So on turn 1, you thought seize your opponent twice, and you have a 3/2 menace, which will very quickly close the game out, right? And this is just a 2-card combo. That seems very good. Right, back in the day, we had Dark Ritual Mind Twist for 2 on turn 1, and that was a gross play that people hated. And this is better. This is better than Dark Ritual Mind Twist. on turn 1. By a mile, honestly, right? This leaves you a body that's really, really difficult to block and closes the game quickly. And you get to choose the cards. It's just strictly better than one of the most broken starts in Magic history, literally. So I'm not sure about this one, y'all. I think this might be a bridge too far. And honestly, I don't mind this card. On turn 4, when you don't evoke it, let's say you like draw it in the late game, if your opponent has cards left in their hand, it's just kind of fine to cast the card for its normal mana cost. People aren't really talking about that, but I think that for its normal rate, in the right game state, it's actually not terrible either. You know, the game's stalled out, you're on top deck mode, not a terrible card to draw. Still, overall, I think the card is juiced. I think the card is very decent, even without the Ephemerate combo. But with the Ephemerate combo, this is good. Is that controversial? It's a good card. Everybody still with me? I know not everyone stuck around for the Modern Horizons previews, but I hope you did, because I had fun with those. There were a few of those I hadn't even seen before, and then a couple that I know of, because like literally everyone is talking about them. Aside from that, I'm done. So I hope you enjoyed it. Just let me know how you felt about all of these cards. Not just my takes, but just like your takes. It's your turn. Let me know how you're important. You're important. You are. You're a clever person who has a lot of value, and you're important. Go to the comments section. Let me know how you feel about these cards. I know I snickered. I laughed at that, but I meant it. You're important. I want to know your opinion. So go in the comments section. Let me know how you felt about all these cards. Any interactions I missed, which I did, because I'm not a modern player. So now's your time. If you're just like, Dev, it does this, let me know in the comments section. Aside from that, I guess I'm done for this one. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.